Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first meeting of this year of the Business Regeneration and Planning Overview Committee. Evacuation procedures. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, please evacuate the building as quickly and as calmly as possible. Please use the stairs and not the lifts. Once outside, please gather around the Virgin Money building, formerly Yorkshire Bank, on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door in which you entered or via the doors with the fire exit routes shown. If by any chance you need assistance, please make yourself known to the member of the staff. Can you please ensure that your phones are turned off or onto silent? This meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future use on the council's site. We currently have two apologies. Councillor Evans, substituted by Councillor Hammersley. Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. And we also have Councillor Neil Phillips has supplied his apologies. Correct? Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting, dated the 28th of April. You'll have copies thereof. Thank you. Can I have someone to... Thank you, Councillor Brown. And second, Councillor Condacor. Thank you very much indeed. I'll sign those as a record thereof. Thank you. Just a couple of things raised from that. I just want to yeses or no in all fairness. A question was raised by Councillor Condacor regarding zero emissions, I remember, from the last time round, regarding the council. Did you meet with Councillor Smith?
Chair, we had a meeting, I think it was Tuesday or Monday, yesterday, about planning, and I showed Councillor Smith the document from Warwick, which we obviously want to do something similar in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest that are not listed in the schedule? Appreciate we have some new members on this committee tonight, but I'm sure your declarations of interest are already registered and they do not differ from what the schedule is. Okay, thank you very much. Public consultation. Any member of the public? Do we have any questions from the public? No. Okay, thank you very much. Item 6, questions to the Cabinet. We have two Cabinet members here. So any member of this committee wish to raise any questions? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Unfortunately, there's a few because it's been a while since we've met. Firstly, thank you, Councillor Smith, for meeting with me this week. That was most useful. One of the things that has come up is all the very long-standing planning applications, which then have changes of layout. And a few of my residents are currently having a dispute about the Persimmon development, which doesn't seem to be what the residents were expecting. And we had this going right back to the bad old days when the Fox and Crane was done, which was probably before your time, where developers changed their plans, and the plans that residents may have seen when they got the sign on the lamppost or the letter aren't the same as what goes to planning committee. And with the best will in the world, councillors cannot go through every plan and see where houses have moved. So can we try and tighten up on this and have a reconsultation where a house is changed near the boundary? Obviously, these big estates are very large, but if the developers are turning houses around and pushing them closer to boundaries of people's back gardens, I think it will save us having complaints and requests to go to Ombudsman if we actually have consulted when plans have changed. And particularly these large developments, they are sort of 1 or 2 years between planning applications being made and it going to a committee. And also, Councillor Smith, can we have some action on the website? Because when residents do raise these problems, or I want to have a look at it, the website doesn't have the original drawing and then the current version sometimes. I don't know if you've tried the planning portal we've got, but it just says plan, lots of numbers, and it's up to how well the officers put the plans on to know that this was the original plan in 2012, say, and this is the plan in 2014 that was approved. Otherwise, when there is a query, people can't go back and see the original version that they would have seen when they went on the portal, and then the version of the date of the planning meeting. So if you can take those two things away, that would be most useful.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Working. There you go. Yeah, they're both sensible suggestions. I have no problem with that. I'll take them back to the team and we'll try and find solutions to both of those.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Condacor.
And two questions for the leader of the council. Firstly, we're starting to put stuff on the ground in terms of transforming the Nuneaton projects going on, and they're not in our dashboard to this committee. Obviously, we don't want to micromanage what goes on, but maybe it would be useful in our performance dashboard or something to have a progress figure when we do these meetings, because we've got lots of other performance data, and actually the hotel and the catering block for the college, all these things are quite large projects, so it might be useful just to have a single line of progress against target or something, because otherwise we have to ask you how it's going, whereas if in the scrutiny report it said on budget, on track, or it would be useful. And the second question I've got, Chair, if I may, is I went to the markets, Bedworth on Saturday and Nuneaton on Wednesday. The Nuneaton market was looking really good in the sun, but the indoor market in Bedworth is looking very tatty, and I think we need to actually work out what the future of the indoor market is. So I don't know if the leader could tell us when decisions about that part of Bedworth are going to be announced. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So in relation to the first one, I have no issue with asking officers to see if there is some kind of dashboard that can be dealt with. It isn't, transforming the Nuneaton isn't something where you can have a hard and fast target, because obviously it is a work in progress. You have negotiations with government, with developers, etc. It's not like how many benefit claims have we processed in a quarter, for example. It's not something that is that definable, but we can try and have a look at that. But there are other metrics which do go to the Transforming the Nuneaton board. There are updates which go to Cabinet. Indeed, I think there was an update at the last Cabinet meeting, which Councillor Condacor has the opportunity to see the pink papers on, and indeed raise points which I do endeavour to try and answer at Cabinet. And I am also willing, when I am able to come to these meetings, to be questioned on Transforming Nuneaton and Bedworth, as I hope I have evidenced in the last municipal year. In relation to the market in Bedworth, there are no hard and fast plans at the moment for what we do with it. We are looking at what our options are, because whatever we do will involve money, and it's what is the best investment for the residents and what gets us a better market in the long run. The reality is that the Bedworth market was poorly designed. It is very expensive to actually try and modify, particularly in light of what some of the market traders have asked for. For example, increased lighting, photovoltaic equipment so that they can have heating in the winter. All of these are expensive to put in such a small area to do what some of them are after. So we are going back to first basics and looking at what it is that we can deliver and then how we can deliver it. There aren't any firm plans, but they are being discussed at the Transforming Bedworth working group. And that is where we have had some preliminary discussions about some options, but they are not yet ready to go public because they haven't been worked through fully yet, although I have asked for figures to be looked at as and when we have officer capacity. As Councillor Condacor knows, officer capacity is at a premium in the council, and so we are trying to prioritise the different strands of work because there are only so many officers, we have a number of vacancies, And as both myself and Councillor Smith and other Cabinet members have highlighted in response to various different questions, recruitment is difficult in the current climate because there are a lot of other councils which pay more than we can actually afford. So we're having to try and see how we can change our strategy to make ourselves more attractive and desirable to officers, which would then help ease the workload, so we can look at getting some of these things moving at a pace that we would be more happier with.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. A very comprehensive response. Councillor Condacole.
If I could just come back on the last point, I think it would be useful for the market traders, if things aren't going to change quickly, to have some clarity, because I think they're not on their normal yearly pay years rent in advance type thing at the moment. So if nothing's going to happen for a year, it's useful to have that message, so at least they can invest in a year's stock and know where they're going. At the moment, I think the uncertainty means you then get a downward spiral because they don't see what the future is, therefore they don't invest. So I think if your message is it's too early and we're not doing anything quickly, it'd be useful to sort of clarify that to the traders. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Can I just emphasise, Chair, to Councillor Condacole, it is not shutting the market, so there is no reason for traders to fear that there is a reason for them not to purchase stock. It is purely about the physical environment of the actual market itself. That is the issue at hand. It's not about whether we want to have an indoor market space. It is whether the current space is fit for purpose, which it isn't. I don't think anyone would say it is fantastic at all. It is, can we get something better, or is it more cost effective in the long run to retrofit what we have, given the physical constraints of the site and the actual structure itself, because the structure is ageing and it is not the best structure in the world, and it is difficult to modify in its current form. So there's no reason for traders not to go out and purchase any stock. That is certainly not the message that I want any councillor sending out. The message is about the actual physical structure itself. The market will remain, but it is the structure.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Cape.
Yeah, thank you. Being relatively new to these committees, I did have 3 questions before the committee, which the officers kindly answered. So 2 of those I'm very happy with now. There is one point, however, that came out as a result of a question, which is I find it a little bit strange in several documents to have the term savings used for lack of council salaries that have been paid. So what I requested, and I requested at another oversight committee, was whether it would be possible to have vacancies, salaries due, agency staff that are filling those, and the cost implications. Is it a plus or a minus? So in other words, I would prefer if it wasn't referred to as a salary saving, it's a salary adjustment, because it might be causing additional costs elsewhere, which we're not aware of. The reply I had to the question was that it had been an ongoing issue for some time, and that the payroll had new software 18 months ago that could start to address some of these questions in conjunction with finance, so that we can get an accurate prediction of what positions are empty, how much is it actually costing us, but it hasn't been joined up. So what I'd like to know is there anything that can be done to give the officers the software or the methods whereby these questions can be answered readily, because it will feed into lots of other committees, including the employment committee. An observation, not a question.
Thank you, Councillor Cape. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Wilson? Thank you.
Thank you. It's not, strictly speaking, a question within the remit of this overview and scrutiny panel, but to try and answer some of what I think Councillor Cape is getting at, is that historically this council has reported it as a saving. What we have done since we came into control is said that that isn't enough, and we have asked them in the last year to begin work on splitting out what the actual difference is between what the salary budget is and what it has cost us in real terms in terms of agency spending, because the 2 were being reported but they weren't actually being cross-referenced and actually working out what the overall net figure is to the council. That work is ongoing in terms of that, because it might be that the number of positions vacant equals, I mean, for example, I think our agency budget was last year in the region of about £1.2 million. I'm trying to remember the figures off the top of my head here. But is the actual equivalent salary amount in terms of the vacant positions £1 million? Is it £2 million? Is it £500,000? Those are questions that as Cabinet we have been asking in our regular management team meetings that we have with our officers every month at Leadership Board, and they are doing work on that. But as I have highlighted before and will continue to highlight, the Finance Department is struggling with staffing itself. We have lost the head of finance. We have tried to recruit to that position twice, and we have not had anyone successful, or indeed anyone actually apply since Craig left. We have a new finance director who is trying to catch up with not only the audit from 1920, 2021, and also trying to work out what the base figures are for 22-23. And she is also trying to manage without a head of finance. So I would ask councillors to bear with us, because the officers are prioritising what they can against deadlines and what is absolutely pivotal for us to work to, and what is a nice to have. So there is work going on in the background, but we can't do everything all at once.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other questions for Cabinet members? Okay, thank you very much for that. We shall move on to item 7, the annual report of the Coventry and Warwickshire LEP. Thank you. And I believe that's via Teams.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I can't see you guys, so bear with me, because I've just got a couple of, I can only see you, Steve, in the chair. So my name is Paula Dees, and I'm the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership. And thank you for inviting me along to present at your overview and scrutiny panel. I've been involved with Coventry and Warwickshire LEP from day one, helped to set it up, been involved in its development to date through to its current status. It's a private company limited by guarantee. It's a board, public and private sector, and education and health of 20. It's currently chaired by our 5th chair, a person called Sarah Windrum, and we've got a 12-year history. I know you have a slide deck that has gone out with your pack, so I'm going to work on the basis that you do have a general view and understanding of Coventry and Warwickshire LEP, but essentially, just to reiterate, we are a private public sector partnership aiming to deliver economic growth across the Coventry and Warwickshire geography. I'll break it into 5 parts. There's a bit of context, the first couple of slides, something around the kind of funding that we've done, in particular in Nuneaton and Bedworth, mostly around our capital investments, some of it, not all, a little bit about how we're helping businesses in Nuneaton and Bedworth through the Growth Hub, and then something around our activities with our Champions Network, and then just a final summary slide. So I'll keep it brief, but obviously very happy to answer any questions at the end. So just moving to the first slide, I mean, that is literally a kind of a reflection piece on a decade of working with Nuneaton and Bedworth and Borough Council. You guys were with us from day one in terms of the setup. It covers a kind of a number of bullets there around our general projects, as well as some recognition of specific projects in Nuneaton and Bedworth. And we have, as I say, from day one, enjoyed working with Nuneaton and Bedworth. We have had previous councillors, Julie Jackson and Councillor Harvey, on the board, and we're currently pleased that Chris Wilson is indeed a director on our very strong and positive board, and we also enjoy engagement with your executive officer teams. So over the years, we've grown with a lot of national recognition, profile and influence in terms of LEP activity. We are a well-known LEP. We've highly performed. We're always in the top 3 around performance. We've got a good reputation nationally with a LEP network, and we're known for leading regionally important projects. In particular, a couple of examples there around the work to try and land a gigafactory here in the region. And we've also been one of the lead agencies in trying to bring forward a new approach to West Midlands, a business support model. Just more recently, some of the work that we've been doing with ministers and local MPs is helping to secure funding for the future of Nuneaton's Abbey Theatre. We've also had good engagement with your officers around some of your work on levelling up round 1 and indeed round 2. So some good examples there of where we've collaborated over the years. The next slide I'm actually not going to go into in a lot of detail. The information is a sample, and I have to kind of make an acknowledgement. It is a sample from our annual review from last year, and I guess in reading that you will see a reflection piece about the things that we've achieved over the 10-year period, and there's some really positive facts and figures in there, whether that's about numbers of learners, whether that's around increase in GVA. But I think it is important to stress that there is an absolute recognition that this analysis is over a lifetime of our work, and actually the current here and now story and actual situation with the economy is something which is very different, taking into account the current economic climate, the cost of living pressures, inflation, energy, supply chain, etc. So that slide is not meant to basically say we're ignoring the current issues. It is literally designed, as I say, to give you a flavour of the kinds of impacts that we have enjoyed, probably more pre-pandemic, in pre-pandemic times. Moving perhaps to sort of look at some of the funding activity that we have worked with you alongside. It's already been mentioned, of course, one of our big investments from our local growth fund is a contribution of 7.5 million towards your Transforming Nuneaton programme. For us, you know, we're very pleased to be part of that and to be making that investment. You guys will know already the kinds of impacts that it's having. You know, the cultural and leisure offer in the town being trying to increase that, the new homes that are planned, and all of this activity is designed to bring economic and business growth improvements to the lives and people of businesses based in Nuneaton. So you know, this and Nuneaton and Bedworth and the surrounding area. So you know, that's a good example of where this project in particular was prioritised, certainly by the LEP, as having significant economic impact. The next one is about Abbey Street. That's one of our more recent projects that was successful in securing the fund launched during the pandemic as a way to try and stimulate the economy, called Getting Building Fund. It's a smaller amount of money, of course, 895,000, but that, I think, by no means should reflect the significance of it. It's a project that really tried to reach out to the kind of the changing requirements of flexible office spaces. It's obviously a well-loved, well-known building in the heart of the town centre, and certainly one that we're really pleased to have been able to provide investment for, to enable 15 new jobs being created, over 400 square metres of new commercial refurbished office space, which again meets the demands of the kind of new type of business that people are seeking, and a greater degree of flexibility in post-pandemic times. So again, yeah, a really good project that we are pleased to have been involved in. Looking probably more widely, another sort of area of successful working between the LEP and Nuneaton is the work on the Nuneaton Towns Fund. There's a combination of both sort of strategic input and some very practical support. 3 of the Towns Board members are very closely involved with the work of the LEP. I'm sure you all know Sean Farnell, who is on our board, Marion Plant, equally on our board, and Les Ratcliffe, who chairs our Place Board, all of whom either live or have businesses in and around Nuneaton. So again, they're providing a valuable personal perspective into this very important aspect of the work of the Towns Board to improve using some very specific projects out of the 24.2 million awarded to the area. Not just people input, again, we've tried to use the expertise of Coventry and Warwickshire LEP, certainly in very practical terms, providing business case analysis for 10 projects that are going to be delivered through the Towns Fund. We provided some business case analysis that enabled you to hopefully get successful decisions from government on that funding going forward. So again, a good example of good collaboration there. And the next slide just shows further imagery in and around the projects in the Nuneaton Towns Board programme. Moving into the slide which covers the Growth Hub, this is another area of our business activity. We run at the Coventry and Warwickshire Growth Hub, which is our business-to-business arm. It is organised by locality, so there's a dedicated account manager that works on businesses and for businesses in the Nuneaton Bedworth area. These figures account for the work that was undertaken between 21 and 22. I won't read them out for you, but it's showing a level of positive activity by the account manager, the numbers of engagements, the value of the referrals, and the types of reason why the Growth Hub are going into businesses in Nuneaton and Bedworth, helping them to tackle and resolve issues around business growth, whether it's related to grant funding, digital support, a general business support help, recruitment and skills. And some of the icons on there you can see are some of the products that we use in order to help businesses realise their maximum potential. And then on the champions aspect of our work, this is an area I think maybe we could probably do better in trying to secure more businesses to get involved in our champions network. It's serviced by a board called the Place Board, which is chaired by Les Ratcliffe, who I've already mentioned. I've included in there some examples over the past year of businesses based in Nuneaton and Bedworth who have joined to become champions. We've got some further ongoing conversations beyond Happy Marketeer and Integrity Wealth. We'd love to get more. So, we'll work much harder in trying to get referrals into that programme. And it's really a positive network. And being honest, there are a group of business stakeholders and ambassadors who genuinely are all working together to tell and sell all that is good about Coventry and Warwickshire. And in fact, in pre-pandemic times, what we did was we used our Place Board meeting and we actually met in Nuneaton and we did a walking tour just as the Nuneaton Transforming Nuneaton programme was getting up and running, and we did a real good walk around the town centre to sort of get to grips with the plans and activities proposed. And then finally, I'll just conclude with, there's lots to come. You guys have obviously got a lot of funding streams that you're managing. We've got Levelling Up Round 2 coming forward. And again, any help that we can offer in terms of that submission and going forward. The investment plans for UK SPF, your allocation of just over 4 million. Again, really pleased to sort of help and support any of those submissions that are made. And the ongoing support, of course, with the Nuneaton Town Investment Plan. And I think probably just to conclude, I've been selective in terms of what I've covered in the brief to you. You'll probably all be aware the current future of the LEP is it will transition into a new kind of vehicle, and that is currently being discussed as a way forward. So I'm guessing that in future years to come and future times to come, it will be a different type of engagement, but I think it was perhaps been helpful for you to perhaps have seen some, if not all, of the benefits of the ways of working between the LEP and Nuneaton and Bedworth, both from the business, education and public sector point of view. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions, and anything that I don't have at my fingertips, of course, will provide follow up to you as well.
Thank you very much, Paula, for that presentation. Any questions from the chamber? We have one question from Councillor Condacor.
You'll be lucky if it's just one. Thank you, Chair. I've been a councillor for 10 years, so I've seen the LEP grow with me and things like the Growth Hub. And it's really important, potentially, the Growth Hub. It had a very rocky start as it was, I think, struggling with a business manager for Nuneaton and Bedworth. And it's grown and it's starting to be effective, I hope. It'd be useful in a lot of these documents if we had the comparison, though. What we really found 10 years ago is we knew our Growth Hub wasn't working well here to start with. It's because we could see the figures for Rugby and Stratford and Warwick. So it'd be useful for us to have the figures for the 5 districts. And then as the Growth Hub is servicing businesses, we can get a feel for whether we are servicing the same number of businesses roughly as the other districts. Because people, from the numbers on the Growth Hub, is 104 engagements good or bad? You know, are you doing 400 in Stratford upon Avon? So I think it's useful to get a bit of a metrics on that. And on the funding stuff, there's a lot of improving highway stuff. But I mean, we recently put in a bid to be the headquarters of British Rail, or British Railway Board, or whatever it was. And one of the things is we still don't have those good connections to Coventry. I think the LEP has been far too, probably from its car history, far too car focused. And actually, it's a lot of the other things like the rail link connections, which I think need to be something the LEP takes forward. So I don't know if anyone's looking at that or how we get rail investment to actually get these things done in Nuneaton and Bedworth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Paula, did you get any of that?
I did, yeah, very happy to provide comparative
Thank
information for the districts. We can certainly provide that as follow-up. That information exists in our in our material. I think it's a fair reflection in terms of the kind of the analysis that's made, and the Growth Hub has grown over time and the relationships have developed over time. So I think certainly we can provide that feedback. In terms of the improving highways, again, I can certainly confirm that is very much a priority. That has been a priority of the LEP. We, of course, are no longer going to be the conduit for capital funds directly through to the LEP. That will all be going directly to respective authorities, either at the upper tier authority or at the district level. So we will obviously continue to be lobbying for those good connections between Coventry and Nuneaton rail-wise. But unfortunately for us going forward, we are not going to be having as much say around the allocation of funding.
Thank you very much for that. Anything else from the floor? In which case, I thank you very much for your report. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
You.
We move on to item number 8. A report from Steve Gore regarding the integrated performance report for the 4th quarter 21-22. Steve, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm Steve Gore, Risk Management and Performance Officer. My role in relation to this report is to pull all the information together. So before I provide a summary of results for the latest quarter, I'd like to run through the information that's included. So the report initially comprised of just appendices A, B and C. I think I should say, first of all, you will see some performance without targets. That's because a number of our service areas have undergone what are called lean system reviews or process efficiency reviews. And the lean system philosophy is, rather than have targets, is to concentrate on improvement. So where you see no targets, it just means that that service area has undergone a lean system review. Appendix A shows finance linked to performance within the remit of the panel. And this information only comes to the scrutiny panel. Appendix B relates to the strategic risk register. This register I review every quarter with directors and management team. That's because risks are owned individually by directors or by management team as a group. Once that process is completed, I update the status and the document itself. Appendix B shows the status summary, followed by a full copy of the latest version of the Strategic Risk Register, dated for document control purposes. As regards the status, this relates to the number of risks that are net green or net amber, which we call satisfactorily managed. Net meaning given the mitigations that have been put in place. And the status is expressed of the net greens and ambers as a percentage of the total risk, and the target being 80%. Should also say that when I provide the summary for the latest quarter, I'll give verbal feedback on the main changes to the document this time. Appendix C is the executive summary to the Strategic Performance Report. The Strategic Performance Report comprises of 9 indicators or measures under 4 headings: finance, processes, people and service delivery, and improvement. It's reviewed monthly by management team and quarterly by cabinet. The executive summary itself shows positive aspects or overperformance and areas for improvement, underperformance. Where any of the 19 indicators or measures are not mentioned, it just means that they're on target. So it's by exception in effect. When I'm pulling all the information together, I'll liaise with managers to get as much commentary as I can to help the panel understand the performance issues. However, you do have the option to invite a manager, which you would do through the chair. It might be that also that you don't want to invite a manager, you just want some more information ahead of the meeting, which you would do via the chair also. For example, you might say, could I have a list of empty commercial properties? So I'd like to make an important request at this stage, as I'm looking to improve the effectiveness of this agenda item in particular. So when you receive the report, if you could, at your earliest opportunity, review the information. The report's issued 2 weeks prior to the meeting. If you could review the information and decide whether you require a manager to attend or you want some additional information, and contact the chair as soon as possible, because that will allow the committee officers plenty of time to make the arrangements. And when I issue the reports in future, I'll make sure there's a reminder included. I'm saying that for 2 reasons. Firstly, for the benefit of new members or for members who may be new to scrutiny. And secondly, as I say, to make this meeting or this agenda item as effective as it can be. Because, as I say, my role is to pull all the information together. I don't have the detailed knowledge of the service areas to answer specific performance questions, and that can be frustrating for us all. Appendices D and E have been added at the request of a former panel. Appendix D relates to freedom of information requests and environmental information requests outside of their designated timescale, which is 20 days. I should say that environmental requests are a statutory obligation on the council to provide any information it holds on the environment. Similarly, Appendix E shows complaints outside of their designated timescale, which is 10 days. There's one other piece of information that's contained in the report, which is within the initial narrative, and it relates to covert surveillance. An external report highlighted it would be good practice to keep elected members informed of any covert surveillance that is being undertaken. There isn't any, and the legal section advised that there is unlikely to be any in the future, but I do still ask the question each quarter. So moving on to the summary of results for the latest quarter, which is the end of year or 4th quarter 21-22. Appendix A. I think the first thing I should say is that the financial data in Appendix A relates to the latest information available, which is the 3rd quarter. This is because the finance section have had recruitment and staff turnover issues. So Appendix A itself shows of the 6 indicators that come to the panel, 5 have improved and 1 has declined. That is the average time to process planning applications. In relation to Appendix B, the Strategic Risk Register, at the end of the 4th quarter, net red were 3 net amber 4 and net green 12. And so therefore 16 or 84% of the risks are deemed as satisfactorily managed. The 3 net risks relate to accommodation needs, R1, economic vibrancy, R4, and the pandemic, R20. The key updates for this quarter related to R1 accommodation needs, which was updated for the formulation of the town centre strategy and development of the supplementary planning document. R6, arson and accidental fire, a planned action has been added relating to fire and carbon monoxide detection systems. R7, breakdown of council services. 2 planned actions have been added regarding the introduction of a business continuity planning policy and appointment of head of people and culture to lead on emergency planning. R8, failure to deliver key elements of the corporate plan. Reference has been added to building a better borough, replacing delivering our future as the corporate plan. And R16, cyber security, a planned action has been added relating to a cyber security peer review. In relation to Appendix C, the executive summary of the strategic performance report, of the 19 measures, 11 are green and 8 are red. The red measures shown under areas for improvement are working days lost to sickness absence short term, working days lost to sickness absence long term, short term return to work interview compliance within 3 days, agency staff spend, delivering our future monitoring assessment, health and safety monitoring assessment, and annual development reviews completed. As regards Appendix D, freedom of information and environmental information request, 618 were received, 617 completed, 132 were late, and 1 was outstanding in the period. And finally, complaints, 1,021 were received, 1,015 were completed, 319 were late, and 6 were outstanding.
Thank you, Steve. Can I open up to the floor for any questions? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things off here. On the risk register, there's still far too many acronyms. As you go down, particularly on the mitigations, there's quite a lot of things. And I know more of them being a long-standing councillor, but I don't know all of them. And some of it's just gobbledygook because they're just letters that don't mean anything. So if we can try and maybe use the full name for particularly some of the things that aren't common, would be quite useful on the risk register. In terms of particular risks, the data protection officer we shared with Rugby. I don't know if that's still an ongoing issue, but we did have a lot of problems with data protection officers, and if we've got our own now or how that's going, it'd be useful to get some clarity. And a lot of the risks are all tied in with planning, and the massive staffing problems we've got in planning, which it's not just our council, all planning is a key recruiting issue. It'd be useful to maybe get the officer in on that, because it then knocks on so many, and our risks are saying green, the net risk, which I think needs to be updated so we actually get some more resources on the planning side. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Steve.
Well, as regards the acronyms, they are explained on the first one, but you're probably right in terms of as you go further down the list, unless you scroll back up to the top, you're not going to see where it was originally referenced. So we can take that on board. And I do believe we have our own data protection officer now.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the planning item that Councillor Condacor raised, I don't think it's for a lack of will to actually get planning officers in place. It is, as I stated before, the market forces that we are in. We have lost or will be losing 2 of our key planning officers shortly, and we are trying to put measures in place to recruit to replace those as quickly as we possibly can, if at all, hopefully before they leave, but we're not holding our breath on that front. So I don't think it is a lack of effort. I think it is a reflection of the current market forces that we are facing, because certainly from Cabinet, the direction we have given is that planning is a key area where we need to try and recruit to as best that we can.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for that. Councillor Condacor?
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't disagreeing with anything the leader said of the council. What I was disagreeing with is the fact that that's actually marked as green low as a net risk. So I think the risk register needs to be updated to actually effectively raise it up the management tree and the council's tree, that this is something that actually needs a good eye. So I wasn't disputing that it's a national problem and we have got a big problem. My issue was it isn't actually marked as a problem in the risk register. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking through the information here, especially in relation to the risks, all risks in the report seem to be treated equally, but as we know from experience, all risks are not equal. Some of the risks that the council are identified in here are statutory obligations that we have. Some of them arise from our own policies. Some of them are business critical, whereas others are not business critical. And yet there's no emphasis given in the risk register to recognise which of these risks are perhaps more important to the council were we to fail than others. Some of them may arise because they're advisory, and failure would actually be tolerable because it's advisory. I know if you were in a company and you had an ISO inspector, the ISO inspector would pick up on the things that are statutory and perhaps take up things that were advisory. But you're under no obligation to adopt those things because they're advisory, not statutory. So I would like to see the risk register have some sort of context to it to tell us which of the risks are business critical and which of the risks are statutory, so we can give some sort of due emphasis when we're considering the report as to which areas that are, say, amber, for example, are more critical for our consideration to those which may be of lesser implication to the council were we not to achieve it. And I wonder, can we do that? If you want to answer that first, I've then got another question, please.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Steve?
Well, all I can say is the next review is actually due next week, and I'm meeting management team, so I could raise that issue then to decide, you know, which way we go with that in terms of importance, priority, etc.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. The other observation I would like to make on this is that you can perhaps correct me if I'm wrong here, Steve, but all 3 scrutiny panels see the risk register at their meetings, and each of the scrutiny panels sees the integrated performance report each quarter. To avoid repetition on your part, and perhaps repetition of the same questions from different panels, could I perhaps suggest that we have one meeting of the joint overall scrutiny panel to consider the quarterly report and the risk register? That way you can give your report once to the assembly of the panel members. They can all ask their questions once, get the same answer and hear it, and it avoids duplication of effort and repetition of questions perhaps. Or members might actually pick up on something that somebody from another panel has said and want to delve deeper into it, but in isolation we don't necessarily all perhaps pick up on that point, and so something could slip through the net, as it were. And it's just a suggestion, and I'll be open to the panel here as to whether you think that's a good idea. And if we do think it's a good idea, perhaps we can put it to the other panels and we look at these reports once only rather than being repeated 3 times through. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Brown. Very good suggestion. I'm sure from Steve's point of view that would make more sense, having to only give this report out once per quarter rather than 3 times per quarter.
Yeah, it certainly would, Chair. As regards the strategic risk register, if we were staying in the current format of 3 panels and me reporting to 3, I am in discussions at the moment with management about tailoring them to suit each panel. So you'd have, specific panels, and you'd also have a few that were all. But if you go down the other route that Councillor Brown suggested, well, that wouldn't come into force, obviously. So we'd probably need a decision on that from wherever. But yeah, it certainly seems sensible to me.
Can I open it up for any suggestions or comments from the floor? Yes, Councillor Brown again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back, could I then formally propose then the chairs of the 3 scrutiny panels might like to get together and agree a way forward on this to make sure that we give the best service to members and have the best outcome from an officer's effort and duplication point of view.
I've got no problems with that. Yes, sir. Councillor Morton first, please.
Yeah, Councillor Condick has got 9 years and 9 months on me, so I'm new, but what would that leave this meeting to do? Because this is the biggest, the 2 items you talked about are the biggest content of this meeting, are they not?
There's more. There's obviously, over the period of the year, you'll find there is more than this quarterly report that we do discuss. So there's other issues that we have brought up in the past. Yes, this is a part of, don't get me wrong, but as a document, yes, it's very large.
Yeah.
But there are other items that we brought to this committee. Thank you. Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a concern about things being agreed by the 3 scrutiny chairs, because scrutiny is a very important role for the opposition groups, and if the 3 scrutiny chairs organise what goes on, then that needs to be in consultation with the other groups. Also, I do actually prefer the other way of going, is actually to, I mean, we've already got part of this document, it's only for our panel. So it's actually the risk register that's a big thing that's the same to all panels. And I think if Steve is looking at sort of separating that out, because some of them are clearly housing and things like that, and some are clearly economic development. So maybe if we did have a tidy risk register by OSP theme, it might make a smaller document which will save paper, but do actually give us the opportunity to scrutinise the things that this panel is involved in, which is the planning and the economic development. And we've got the 2 correct portfolio holders here. So I think when you start having everything all grouped together, you then need 6 cabinet members. And although you think you're solving a problem, you're just making a bigger meeting and a different problem. Whereas actually, I think the problem with the duplication is the fact we haven't got this sorted out and divided up into the stuff that is housing and planning and economic development, and then the housing committee isn't getting stuff that's just the housing and housing and environment, whatever their title is. And in the past, we had an external and internal scrutiny, which obviously then had a different petition. But I do think we need to think about this, because otherwise we just create a different problem.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. I don't believe that Councillor Brown was suggesting anything underhand by the 3 committee members. I believe he was just suggesting that we came together to decide whether or not we should have 1 committee in total to look at the risk report. Anybody else like to? Councillor Wilson.
Chair, I'm not a scrutiny panel member, but I have done a lot of scrutiny in my time, because until last year I was what felt like permanently in opposition. But as someone who has been here for 12 years, it might be useful to give some benefit of that experience, that you would end up having to put in 4 extra meetings a year to do that, because you'd have to have a joint meeting. And whilst the one that Councillor Brown ably chaired was a one-off, it was at my request, because it saved me having to do everything 3 times, and it does have its benefits, believe me, because I didn't have to do it 3 times, but you've got to find 4 extra meetings, and we did used to have, in the dim and distant past, a formal joint overview and scrutiny commission. It had its pluses and minuses. Sometimes it was just a talking shop and repeated a lot of stuff that the overview and scrutiny panel, I think it was only myself and Councillor Brown who actually remembered them. Councillor Condacor might just remember them. But it may be worthwhile asking Democratic Services if they can dig out the old terms of reference for the Overview Joint Scrutiny Commission. That might give the panel chairs something to base themselves off, or without wishing to force you into one way, it's perfectly in order actually for scrutiny to look at having a scrutiny item itself on scrutiny, if that makes sense, and allow members to come up with ways that they would like to improve scrutiny. I mean, we have done that in the past. I won't prejudge that, because obviously there might be financial costs, whatever, when it comes to full council. But in my view, scrutiny needs to be effective and enable members to fully participate. Those might be some areas of my experience which might help members in making their decision. I'm not pointing you in one way or the other, just saying these are things you might want to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to go with my original proposal that the 3 chairs look at it and bring back proposals to the panel to decide on.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And one point to you, Steve. You said you was looking at identifying the various risks relevant to the various OSP committees. Is that what you're looking to do for the next report?
Yeah, that's exactly that. I mean, in discussion with senior managers, we just think we could tailor it better so keep you more focused on risks that are pertinent to each panel. But obviously there will be some odd risks that will be across all 3. But yeah, next time that is the intention, that you won't get the full register for this one, for example. It'd be the ones we identify that are appropriate, so that they're only going to one panel, albeit that you will still have a small number of risks that go to all 3.
Okay, thank you very much. I have just a couple of questions myself. I don't expect you to answer them at this moment in time, but if you could look into it and deal with it. We've brought up many a time about the extended period of time for planning applications and the average figures. Now, obviously, we're fully aware, and has been brought to our attention, that there are, if not 2, if not 3, very long outstanding applications. That obviously is skewing the average situation. Is it not possible to take those out of the equation to give us a more relevant figure of what is actually we'll call it the normal time of average time of planning applications?
Well, I would suggest I would be able to request the manager to extract them and then say this, if they're excluded, it would be this or something of that nature. So you've got, I think, from what I understand, planning are obliged to provide the information as is and not take out any ones that are, they have a special name for it, but I can't, outliers or something like that. But yeah, I can get both bits of information, I'm sure, from the planning manager.
Thank you. And one last question from myself. I have a councillor. One of the things was spoke about within the report regards the cost of agency staff relevant to the cost of permanent staff. Now, I looked at, and looking at me, the costings of the agency staff has increased by 83%. But the question would be, what is that relevant to percentage-wise the overall cost of staffing costs? Now, I don't expect you to give that answer straight away, obviously. I appreciate that it's not within your remit as such, but if you could let us have that detail really in the next report, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to answer one of your questions almost. The planning departments produce statistics to the government on the number of applications determined within 13 weeks, the average time to determine applications. There's a whole lot of stats, and if you look on the website for the, I don't know if it's on the Planning Inspectorate website, that there's actually a massive spreadsheet about how our planning is doing relative to anyone else's, and it might be informative if the committee asked us just to have that information rather than having some new information generated, and actually having it for the 5 districts so we can see how we're comparing to the other districts that have got the same problem. I mean, it's all online on the government statistics website, but I think it would be useful to get those statistics, which are the government's ones, and also compare ourselves to the other 4 districts.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that possible, Steve, to bring that forward to the next meeting?
Well, I don't know. I can ask the question.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Councillor Brown, sorry.
Chair, if you remember, I made a proposal. I don't know whether you asked for a second or not.
Councillor Brown proposed that we have a joint meeting of the 3 OSP chairs and come back with proposals for this committee.
Discussion and approval or otherwise of the committee.
Can I have a seconder for that?
Yep, Graham Morton. Yep.
Thank you, Steve, for your time.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Next item, item 9 on the agenda, which is the forward plan for noting purposes. Sorry, Councillor Connicor.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just have some confirmation that the budget outturns and the capital outturns will actually come through as predicted? Because I know we've got financial delays and we've only got 3rd quarter financial data, so it'd be useful if we had an indication. Because the forward plan says the earliest a document might come to Cabinet, not when it will come to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can you answer that one, Chris? Please, Councillor Wilson.
I can't give any definitive answer because Vicky Summerfield, the new director, is trying to wade through all of the required documents that she has to. She is aiming to have the most essential ones dealt with by July, but I can't give a cast iron guarantee.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Item 10 on the agenda, draft work programme for the business for our OSP. We have a addendum, you should have received that. Raised by Councillor Evans with relation to, as he puts it, defunct council-owned land. I'm sure you've all had opportunities to read it. He's requesting that we take a register of all defunct pieces of land in the borough, such they can be dealt with and listed, potentially for the purpose of sale to members of the borough, as it were, etc. I do believe that Councillor Smith wishes to speak on this behalf. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the face of it, it's a sensible proposal, selling off bits of unused land, often troublesome areas generate a bit of money. I get the thought behind it. Unfortunately, this recommendation was born from the frustration of not being able to sell a piece of land to a resident in the proposer's ward, and it's a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. This proposal isn't as simple as it seems, and there's a whole host of reasons why it's not a viable proposition. The majority of council land is held for a specific reason, or under a specific obligation, such as public open space, amenity land, parks, play areas, access and egress, parking, etc. There are loads of reasons why we hold land. There's no such thing as defunct council land. It might not be well used or poorly managed, not maintained. These are separate issues, but it isn't defunct. For example, where a developer's transferred land to the council under a planning condition or obligation, the land's held as public open space or amenity land. The land will have its use restricted by planning, and the transfer of the land to the council will contain restrictions on its use or disposal. Consequently, the council is not always in a position to dispose of land that falls within that sort of category. Just because a resident asks to buy a strip of land, it doesn't mean the authority has to sell it. There's no automatic right to buy where council land is concerned. If we're approached to sell a piece of land, there's a process to follow which is detailed and could take up valuable officer time. We have to check to ensure the land's actually owned by us. There's often confusion over ownership of small pieces of land between different authorities or developers. We liaise with legal to undertake a title check to establish any restrictions on the land use or disposal. For instance, it may be given to us as part of a development and has restrictions in place that negate our right to sell it. We check with planning to establish planning status. For instance, is it a public open space? And what's the acceptability of any alternative use of that proposed land? Is it garden land, driveway, construction or extension? That all needs looking into. We check with housing and parks and amenities as controlling service users to get their views and possible consent to move forward. We consult with ward councillors, which is a requirement of existing policy. And we carry out a wider consultation with adjoining and nearby properties that may be affected, which is also a policy requirement. All of this work takes time and accrues costs. Whilst the process is managed by the Land and Property team, the decisions relating to the land, to dispose or not to, rest with the controlling service unit, such as housing, parks and amenities. If we're in a position after all those checks to offer the land for sale, we need a valuation and add that to our costs accrued in the process. So on a hypothetical little piece of land worth, say, £1,000, we need to add our costs, which could be £1,000 to £1,500 in officer time and legals. So we offer then the land for sale at £2,500. The purchaser then has their costs to add to that, which could be another £500. So a little piece of land, inherently worth £1,000, is going to cost them £3,000. So if they then say, no, I'm not interested, I'm not going to pay you £3,000 for that bit of land, we've wasted a lot of officer time and effort for no gain. To give some context to the issues that we face as a department, I can tell you that the Land and Property team, like many of the council teams, is seriously under-resourced due to vacant posts and is currently running at probably 60 to 70% capacity. The longest outstanding vacancy we have is 2 years for a surveyor, and we repeatedly fail to fill vacancies due to a shortage of qualified staff in the marketplace and the fact we can't compete with private sector salaries. So with limited resource, the team must focus on council priorities and critical work streams such as the transformation programme, dealing with buy-to-let properties, managing the council's substantial commercial portfolio, right to buy valuations, statutory valuations and much more. The proposal before the committee would require significant resource across several service units to undertake this piece of work, and there is no capacity to do it unless something else stops. So if committee is minded to recommend this proposal tonight, can you also recommend which piece of critical work we should stop to free up capacity to carry this out? There's a clear cost-benefit problem with the proposal, both financial and in terms of best use of limited officer time. I think you may find a similar situation in other departments that would be involved in this work, so not just land and property, but also legal, planning, housing and parks. And I would ask, is this really a priority at this time, given the limited benefit to the council? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any other? Councillor Morton.
I agree with everything you said. I'm just wondering if there's a compromise, because not all land, take for example, an alleyway at the back of Four Gardens that's creating antisocial behaviour, issues like that. There's an added value then to the council doing something about that, and the doing could be the selling to the owners. So could it not be taken on a case by case on merit, but without the evaluation? Not just because someone wants to buy it, but because we think we should sell it.
Councillor Smith.
I'm not disagreeing with the principle of what's proposed, and I totally agree with you. The problem is we still have the capacity issue to deal with. We have 50 such applications that have been sitting with the department for a very, very long time, and we have no capacity to deal with them, simply because we are dealing with a lot of critical work that we can't afford not to do. And unless we can resolve the staffing problem, which we haven't been able to do, there is no capacity to carry out that work. Antisocial behaviour, etc. We have other things in place to deal with that if it occurs. I don't disagree that selling the land would be a fix-all, but it doesn't mean that it would get rid of the antisocial behaviour per se.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Condacor.
I was going to agree with Councillor Smith. I think I've had 2 applications to buy land in my ward over 5 years, and one of them at least just didn't go anywhere, but there was then a resolution with the Parks Department actually doing some hedge cutting back, and so actually selling the land wasn't the thing that solved the problem, and councillors do get approached, and then you've got because of the delays, you've got no idea why it never happened. So I think actually trying to come with alternative resolutions at the moment. It's also worth noting back in the days of David Cameron and all those, there was the Localism Act, and at that time there was spreadsheets produced of all the council-owned land by the county and the borough. I don't know if that's still on our websites, but I say some of this work was done when they were talking about localism back in whatever year that was. But I say there was a spreadsheet for the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and for Warwickshire County Council of all the council-owned land, which itself was useful because you could identify which council had a bit of land. And we probably need to say we're not going to consider any application worth less than £10,000 or something, just to stop them coming in at the moment. And hopefully once we're through this next 5 years, we can get things different.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, we all agree in principle it would be a good idea, but can this be looked at when we're fully staffed again and have spare time in the years to come? Maybe it could we could revisit this.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Do you wish to respond?
With the current situation, I don't know when that might come about. I'm slightly intrigued by Councillor Condicor's suggestion. I think there is possibly a way to look at larger parcels of land, and that's probably something we do anyway. There are plenty of, for instance, garage sites that we've converted into council housing, and I think there are still a few of those that could be put to better use. So it's something I'll consider and look at, and I'll discuss with the team.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So in conclusion, the concept as raised by the Councillor Evans was sound, except for the fact of the cost implications in real terms. And because obviously the value of a lot of these pieces of land is very low, and the asking price will be very low, the actual on costs would exceed that, and consequently it puts the value of that land above and beyond obviously the requirements or what the resident would wish to spend on a particular piece of land. But likewise, I think we can take on board what Councillor Condacor said with regards to larger pieces of land of a value that would make it appropriate to sell on. At what point the balance, their financial balance is, I'm not sure, but I'm sure Councillor Smith can look at that with officers to see at what point it becomes financially viable to sell a piece of land, and consequently we might be able to address it in that manner. Councillor Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In view of what you've said, can I just ask then that we perhaps note the comments that have been made, and that whilst we can understand the sentiment behind this, that there is no merit at the present time in actually adding this to the work programme.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brown. Are we happy to go down that route? I'm getting nods from the floor. Indeed. I thank you, Councillor Brown. Can we have a proposal? Seconder. Councillor Joy Morton, thank you. All in favour? I believe that to be unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. I'm not aware we have any other business on the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Yes, indeed, page 143, up and coming work programme. If any of the members of this committee have any recommendations for items to be put forward to this work programme, as per Councillor Evans did, I'd be welcome to say that and take it from the floor. Thank you, Councillor Condacor.
Thank you. We've got the single member decision on, or I think it's off the decision, on going out for a new flood risk assessment, because our last one was very, very old, and obviously so much has changed. And I think that might be something this panel might be useful to discuss at some point. And also, I mean, in my ward, and I suspect other wards, we're having a big trouble with silt wash off from the developments. And I'm really pleased our cleansing team have come out and tried to help me shift it. But we need the flooding issues, and particularly the silting issues, covered, because if all your drainage ditches start to silt up because of the developers not putting silt traps in when they develop land, then effectively you lose the capacity to actually take the runoff from the development. So I think flooding is a very live and topical issue, and I think we should probably discuss it at some point this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. We take a note of that, Maria? Indeed. Thank you very much. Any other suggestions? Oh, Councillor Brown, please. Thank
you, Chair. Can I just ask then, if we're going to consider this, that Councillor Condacor completes a form as per Councillor Evans did, and then we can consider it.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Condacor, I'm sure you can do that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to float the idea first, because it's good to get some feedback rather than fill a form out and then people say, oh, I don't want to talk about flooding. Thank you.
No, I'm quite sure we're happy to do that. If you put it on paper, the appropriate form. Thank you very much. Anything else? Any other business? In which case, I call this meeting to a close. I thank you very much for your attendance.